So let's review how far we've come in our SmartUrl class. We have a class, object instantiation here using the class SmartUrl. We send the base URL, goes to the constructor, gets saved. Then we add each of these parameters. They're added here with a key and value, and then we render, and it renders out the URL with the correct parameters as we see here. Question mark ID equals 123, ampersand status equals print, ampersand information equals yes. What we still don't have is a file. For example, I want to add the file code example here. For that, we need to create a property. This is what a property looks like. It's going to be called file. The property has a internal variable. We'll put it up here called mfile. Starts out as empty. Then a property has a public way to change it. And that's just simply a public method. Sorry, set file value. So when we set the file, we send a value, and we simply save the internal variable called file with the value. Now, a property also has a public way to get the internal variable, and that's simply called getFile, and we simply return the internal. So we can now set it. SmartUrl set file code example.php. So, did that change anything? No. It simply saved the text code example.php to the internal variable called mfile. The goal is, however, to add that file when we render it. So when we're rendering, we will get the file as well, equals mfile. And now when we add the base URL, we want to say if trim file does not equal empty, so if there is something in file, then add the base URL in the file, of course, if there's a file. However, if it is empty, then simply the base URL will do. So now if we look at our output, we have http www.tango.info/codeexample.php and all of our parameters. If we, however, leave out the file, then that slash won't be in there appropriately, and that's how we want it. So this is the point in object-oriented programming where building a class actually starts paying for itself, because if you've noticed, we've done a lot of programming, basically to do something that we could have done maybe in a couple lines. But because we have done it in this structured way, we can now add new functionality very quickly. For example, we have one public rendering method called render, and it simply renders out the URL. What if we want to render a link? Let's make that. Let's go down here, make a new public method, and we'll call it renderLink. So in order to make our hyperlink, we make a little variable block here again, and we say the URL is this object render, and that gets what we've been getting out the whole time, namely this. And now we're going to turn that into a hyperlink. Build the link. So href, href what? Simply the URL. We need to close it in double quotes here to be XHTML compliant. Now, what do we need for the text? Well, we'll just use the URL again. No problem. Close the a hyperlink tag. And of course, we need to have this output variable get cleared at the beginning and returned at the end. So now with just a couple lines, we can now render out a hyperlink that has the same logic that we have programmed here, so that all of our logic is in one place for creating the link, and we simply use it here. What's that going to look like? We'll render the text there. SmartUrl. Now it gives us renderLink, and we'll see what it looks like. All in one line. Let's change that. So we now have a link that we can click. Let's click it. It actually doesn't go to the right page. Let's change that, just so you can see it's a real link. So we click here and it goes to code example 123, which happens to be this one about SQL. So now what if we want to add the ability to change the text that is displayed here, but keep the link in the background? Well, now that we have a class, this is very easy. We simply make another property, like file, called text. Let me do a Control F, change all instances of file to text, only in the selected lines. Thank you. Set text, capital, get text, capital. Okay, now we have a property called text that we can change and read from outside the object. And now we have to handle it down here in our renderLink. So we'll simply add it to our variable block, text equals text, no problem, that just gets the internal variable. And now we want to see if the text is empty or not. Define what to print as the text. So if trim text equals nothing, then what should we print? If they didn't provide any text, then text to display, let's call it, equals, then just use the URL like we were. But if they did send, or if they did define a text, then text to display equals the text. Then we just need to change this here. And how did that change our output? Let's see. Not at all, because we didn't add a text. So now we can add a text. We can do this anywhere, which is very flexible. Let's do it up here right after we instantiate the object. So now we have a set text. Click here for an SQL code example, for instance. Now that we set the text, it changes the output of renderLink like this, but under it is still the URL. So in this film, we learned how to add properties, which enables you to change internal information, change private variables inside the object, which then change the way the object is rendered. And the advantage of object-oriented programming in this sense is that now that we have everything in one object, we can do all kinds of things by adding properties and checking the values of internal variables. For instance, you could add security so that no one can add a parameter called status, or that the ID has to be above 100, or that kind of thing. You have a lot of control because first you create the object, and then you add all the information to the object, and then when you render, all of the information is inside the object, so you can apply all of your logic at once there.